Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you are listening to us from, or whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support and all of the messages and all of the things that you've sent to me, all the things that you've sent to the show, all the questions that you've had, all the stuff that you want to hear discussed in future episodes. I have a really long list of the topics that you guys are interested in, so I will be sure to keep those coming. And what's really exciting is that one that has come up throughout the years has been a topic of how can I get my players to be a little bit quicker with their reads, a little bit quicker with their decision making? How do I go through the process of improving their basketball IQ. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring a guest on who is willing to speak on what he's done to help his players improve in that area of making quick reads and decisions. So we're going to touch on this topic in a few ways. We're going to touch on it on general offensive philosophy. We'll talk about the raising of a player's decision making in basketball IQ. Share some ideas about some drills or actions that maybe you can run. And then also things statistically, things that you may be able to measure in order to kind of get a sense of how well your team is executing on their reads, how well they're maybe doing in a transition situation. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of different stuff. So without further ado, I'm very excited to be joined today by the head coach at Warsaw High School out in Indiana. Very happy today to be joined by Coach Lenny Krebs. Coach, again, a real pleasure to have you on today. How are things going?
First, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to talk basketball with people who are just interested in learning. I'm sure, like I said, I'm going to take some things away from this as well. I obviously don't know it all. I've learned a lot over the years. I have a lot more to learn. But with that being said, things are going extremely well. We had our first teacher day today, teacher day tomorrow. Kids come on Friday. And so we will have about a month of school before we can actually start working with our kids the 1st of September. I'm looking forward to another exciting year. But things are going extremely well. Excited to be here.
Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey and your coaching journey. I know that the game of basketball has definitely been something that's been a part of your life for a very long time. So walk us through where this great game of basketball has taken you, where your coaching journey's taken you, and ultimately how you ended up here at Warsaw.
For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure very few of you know me, I was actually born with a profound hearing loss in both ears. My parents did not discover I had a hearing loss until 3rd grade. And I went through elementary school, middle school, high school with a profound hearing loss, just wearing a hearing aid on one ear. And one of the things I did was I found myself getting wrapped up in the game of basketball because it kind of gave me an identity outside of, oh, well, there's Lenny, the kid with the hearing loss. It kind of gave me a different identity. And so I just fell in love with the game, fell in love playing the game, fell in love working at the game. And it just became something that I did. And besides that, growing up in Indiana, it's kind of what people are expected to do. Young kids are expected to play basketball. So I actually played high school basketball and then I played high school at Fairfield High School, which is a small school. I graduated with about 65 to 75 kids, right in that range. It was a small school with a lot of Amish in the community, and graduated from there and had an opportunity to play at Illinois Valley Community College in Oglesby, Illinois. And one of the things I learned at an early age was you can take any negative situation and turn it into a positive opportunity. And that came into play with my hearing loss in Indiana when the gyms were full and you're shooting a free throw and everybody's screaming and yelling. I had an advantage because I actually would reach up and turn my hearing aid off and shoot my free throws.
Yeah.
and then run down the court and turn my hearing aid back on. And that paid off because my freshman year in college, I was third in the National Junior College Athletic Association in free throw percentage. My sophomore year, I was first in the nation in the National Junior College Athletic Association in free throw percentage. So I learned at an early age that you can turn a negative situation into a positive opportunity. So from there, I went from Illinois Valley to Grace College in Winona Lake, Indiana, and played for Jim Kessler. Coach Kessler is a legend in the NAIA coaching ranks and had an opportunity to play there. Played for 2 more years before I graduated and started my teaching and coaching career at Northwood High School in Napanee, Indiana. Got to coach under 2 Hall of Fame coaches, one of them on the girls' side, one of them on the boys' side. And so I had some great mentor coaches who really took me under the wing and allowed me to learn underneath them. Steve Neff was the girls' coach, and Dan Gunn was the boys' coach that I had an opportunity to work under. Was an assistant coach in both programs there for a while, coached boys for a while, switched to girls. And I will tell you, I will probably never switch back to the boys. I joke, you have to convince girls they're a little bit better than what they think they are. You have to convince these guys that they're not quite as good as they think they are. And so I went from the boys program and as assistant coach, the girls program, fell in love with coaching girls basketball, and was at Northwood for about 7 years before I got my first head coaching opportunity at Goshen High School. And Goshen High School is not well known for their basketball tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Took over a program, and like any young coach, I thought I was going to come in and turn it around quickly. I'm thinking I can come in here and win. I can figure this out. And I won 18 games over a 3 year period. I won 6 games over the next 3 years. So obviously not a lot of success, which at that point in time, I began to question myself, my value, my identity that I had wrapped myself up in as a young kid that was in basketball. I started to struggle with all that. And my wife would tell you I struggled with some tough times, even some depression moments of maybe I'm not as good at this as I think I am, and just stayed the course. And after winning 18 games in a 3 year period, we actually started to win. We had some double digit winning seasons and got to the point we won 18 games, which was one of the most
Wow.
successful seasons at Goshen. And over the 14 years I was at Goshen, the last 5 or 6 years, we were double digit winning seasons um, every year, pretty much during that stretch. But I was also getting burned out with how hard I was working and how much time and energy I was throwing into the program. So after 14 years, I was actually ready to get out of the head coaching role. I was calling around to other coaches in the area just to see if they had assistant positions open. I'm thinking I'll slide over 12 inches. You can have the pressure. I will sit here as any assistant coach and tell you what you need to do, what you're doing wrong. Life's easy 12 inches over. But but during that time period, Warsaw Community High School had a job opening. And if you know Indiana basketball, Warsaw Community High School is one of the top jobs in the state. Um, I thought I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And I have to be honest, it was a God thing to see how many doors opened to make this job possible. Never in my wildest dreams was I thinking I'm going to get that job. I just thought I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
throw my hat in the ring and just see what happens. But God just opened doors that I felt like this is where I needed to be. And I know the change of scenery, the change of environments just re-energized me. And so after 14 years of feeling like I'm getting to the point I'm burning out, coming to Warsaw has been a nice change. And I am loving every minute of it. I will also talk more later about that transition in a sense of I remembered my why. I remembered why I was coaching. And we'll
Mm,
get into that a little bit more with the culture piece of this. But I've now been at Warsaw for 9 years. We have never won fewer than 14 games, and we have won the last four conference titles. We are undefeated in conference over the 4 year period. In fact, in 8 years that I've been here, we've lost six conference games in 8 years.
wow.
Unfortunately, my first 4 years, those losses cost us a conference title. I finished second, 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 and second in conference my first 4 years before we've won the last four now. And this past year, we actually went 26-2, and we're the state runner-ups in the state of Indiana in the largest class. Lost the state finals by 6 points, and very, very blessed. We have three D1 kids that played on that team, three kids that committed to go to Division I basketball. We are only losing one of them, so we have two of them back this coming year. We have three of our top four scorers back. Um, so my goal this year is just to stay the heck out of the way, let the players do what they do, and not screw it up.
Hey, that's sometimes the best coaching there is, right? Is not overcoaching.
That is true. Sometimes I feel like we get in the way too much, and the players just need the freedom to do what they do. Um, they do it well. And, for me, that's the goal, is just to not overcoach and give our kids the freedom to make plays.
Yeah, 100%. That's fantastic. Coach, let's get right into the culture piece. That's something that I know you alluded to, but I'm going to formally ask that to you now about culture. So, it's a hot button issue. A lot of coaches talk about it. A lot of coaches have their own feelings about the word culture, but it's something that exists in every program one way or the other. So, what would you describe currently the culture at Warsaw, and what was the process for getting it built in the way that you wanted that culture to be?
I'm going to take you back, not last year, but the year before, the previous year. We had the exact same group of kids. They were a year younger, but going into the Christmas season that year, we were actually setting it at 8-7. And at that point in time, I'm really beginning to question, like, my goodness, we're extremely talented. We just can't find a way to put these pieces together. After Christmas, we won our last six games of the season and then drew the toughest opponent for the first round of tournament in our area. So we go sectional, regional, semi-state, and state. So sectional, we got the toughest opponent that we could have gotten on the first game of sectional. We led the entire game and got beat on a last second shot with about 4 seconds to go. So one, our kids are going into the year with this bitter taste in their mouth because they knew they were the better team.
Hmm.
And we as coaches really started to evaluate, what do we need to do? And we didn't need to work on the talent piece of this because we were extremely talented. As I said, we have three D1 kids on this team. We have three kids who will they passed 1,000 points last year. So we had three kids do it in a season. So they're talented. But going into last year, we just decided during the course of summer that we don't need to play a ton of games. One, because all of these kids are playing travel, club, AAU basketball. They're getting 40 or 50 games in April and May. They're coming here in June and working out with us. And then they're playing more AAU in July. So in our mind, we don't need to play 20 games in June. So we played maybe 10 to 12 games last summer. But what we started working on was we started work on how to get these kids to connect with each other. And we have a motto that we brought in last year that kind of explained how we were doing this. And I'm a preacher's kid, so there's a lot of biblical background here in a sense of the motto we used was a cord of three strands. A cord of three strands is not easily broken. And our three strands were accountability. One, how are we going to hold each other accountable when we are not doing what we're supposed to do, when we're not the best version of us that we can be? So, accountability. Two, authenticity. I just need each of you to show up every day as the best version of yourself. That's it. That is going to be good enough. At the same time, the authenticity piece also means we have to be each other, allow each other to be who we are. And then three, selfless devotion. That was the big one for us because we had a group of kids. They're extremely confident. As I said, they're talented. When things would go wrong, they would think, well, I'm just going to pick the team up, put them on my shoulders, and I'm going to do this by myself. So we really push that selfless devotion piece. We need to have what we would call dirty shoulders. The goal become to have dirty shoulders. Let someone else stand on your shoulders today. Lift someone else up so they look good. And so we kind of started building the culture around this. And we had 3 leadership teams. Our upperclassmen led the teams. One team was responsible for the authenticity piece. One team was responsible for the accountability piece. One team was responsible for the selfless devotion piece. And we just started incorporating activities around that. And it just started to grow. And in those accountability teams, in those leadership teams, we started a system of points earned based on if you showed up to a workout, if you showed up for summer league games, if you came to team camp. So there were point systems for all of this. But what we did was we made the highest point total. We attached that to the team culture piece, where if you invited the team to an event or you hosted the team for an event and you tried to get a team function, we made that worth the most points. And so it started out in the summer with the coaches offering these things. Let's go to an Indiana Fever game. If you go, you know, then the girls started doing this on their own. They started going, hey, we're going to go to the social in downtown Warsaw and have ice cream. Anybody that wants to go, we're going to meet on Saturday at 8 o'clock, whatever it may be. The girls started initiating this because it started out as this is a way for us to earn points. And it turned into relationships. We were just giving them an opportunity to build relationships off the court. And one of the things that we preached to our kids, and I hate Lego sets. I hate Lego sets. My kids had them when they were younger. You walk across them, you step on them. They're all over the house. But one of the things I showed the kids was I showed the kids the largest Lego set that you could buy. And we talked about, how do you put this thing together? How do you even go about putting a 10,000 plus Lego set together? Well, piece by piece, just keep connecting. And that became our motto. At times during the course of the year, I actually bought the girls Lego keychains that they put on their bags. That was a reminder to them, just connect, just stay connected, keep connecting. Let's keep building this. And so we were doing this all summer, all fall, and the relationships were being formed. You could start to see them truly love each other. And then when we got to the season time and we started practicing, we were very intentional. Every Monday, the last 30 minutes of our practice time, we would go to our team meeting room and do activities that related to authenticity, accountability, selfless devotion, and just continue to build it. There were days I didn't want to leave the floor because I'm like, no, I need to get this work done. I've got 30 more minutes. I don't want to go to the classroom. I need to be on the court. And I had an amazing group of assistant coaches who were, no, we need to go to the classroom. That's what is going to help us put this together and win.
Yeah.
So we were very intentional about that. And we started a reward system that is a sticker of a thumbprint. And inside the thumbprint, you will see the Warsaw Tiger logo. You can be identified by your thumbprint. So what we started doing was when we would catch kids doing the right thing for authenticity, accountability, selfless devotion. For example, a kid is sitting on the bench. She's not playing a lot, but she's up cheering, she's up clapping, she's helping her teammates. We would reward that on those Mondays with a thumbprint sticker that the girls would put on a hard hat, but we would reward that in front of everyone. So for example, Aaron McManus, I know you didn't play the minutes you wanted to play, but you were the reason we were able to win this game. Your energy, the way you picked your teammates up, that's selfless devotion. So we started to recognize those things that had nothing to do with scoring or stats. It was more about those three strands. We purposely started to incorporate this, and it just snowballed. And we got to the point where during the season, the girls would actually come to practice early and they were buying their own Lego sets and going to the locker room and just putting Lego sets together just to hang out. And it just fed on our theme of staying connected. And we got to the point we won our first 18 games, got beat our 19th game, got beat badly. And I knew we were going to be all right when I walk in the locker room after that game and the girls are talking about staying connected. They're talking about, hey, remember the golf ball? I don't know if you know the story of the golf ball, but when golf balls were first made, they were completely smooth. And every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
it
yeah.
would get hit, that whole story they're talking about is just a dent. And so I knew we were going to be all right when they're the ones talking about this because we had cultivated a culture where they were the ones leading with those leadership teams. When we played in the semi-state championship game, we played against the number 9 team in the nation in Hamilton Southeastern. We were up 8 partway through the third quarter. HSE goes on a 16-0 run, which is usually what beats teams that they play. We call a timeout. We're in the huddle. We are not talking X's and O's. We're not talking strategy. My conversation with them went back to we just need to reconnect. We need to stay
I like
connected.
that.
We're going to be all right. And so we were very purposeful about our culture. I think as a young coach, we say we're building culture. We slap a logo on the back of a t-shirt and we say, there's our culture. What I've learned over the years is you have to be purposeful about that.
100% agree.
And so, we are very purposeful about that. We're going to continue to be. And one of the activities that we do early in the year is we ask our kids, what is our community's definition of success? How is our community going to measure our success? I think it's important that we know that.
Yeah.
But then we talk about what is success going to look like to us? How are we going to measure our success? And I give them input on that. They need to have a voice. And so this coming year, they told me our success was going to be measured on 3 things. 1, how we handle adversity. 2, if we show up every day purposeful about getting better. And 3, if we continue to build positive relationships. Then I take those things and I ask them, what are, in your mind, what are 3 things going to be that we need to be aware of that could be a roadblock to our definition of success? And I have them write one thing on a post-it note. So they have 3 post-it notes. All the kids have 3 post-it notes. And I have them put them on the board in front of the room. One side of the board is labeled skills in basketball. One side of the board is people and relationships. And all of the post-it notes, except for one, fell on the people and the relationship side.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it.
And so for us as coaches, what we do is we take all those post-it notes and we try to group them into about 5 or 6 general categories. And those are the things that drive our team building slash culture sessions. Because if those are the things that kids are saying are going to hinder our success, those are the things we need to be aware of. And so, therefore, that is what we use to drive our Monday sessions during the season of culture building.
Mm,
And so we're extremely purposeful about that. And I think that's paid off. At the same time, we take those 5 or 6 things and we share them in our parent meeting at the beginning of the year, that these are the things your daughter is saying is going to prevent us from being successful. Can you, as parents, help us by trying to eliminate any of these things that you can at home?
that's big. They're like speaking about their needs and the things that they are hoping to have their parents understand that they're going through and that they want from their parents.
Correct. Correct.
That is, I mean, that's really powerful. I mean, it's really cool to hear, Coach, about how empowered your players are. That's kind of what I got from your response there, is that your players really have a voice and they're super empowered and allowed to kind of voice the things that they're feeling and take ownership of the program. And I imagine that the results that you can see on the court when you have a team that is like really bought in and really committed and they believe that it's truly their program is really transformational.
And it is. I want you to think about what we as coaches say.
Hmm.
Coach-led teams are good teams, but player-led teams are great teams. However, as soon as the players don't lead the way we want them to lead, or they don't do what we want them to do, we have a tendency to want to yank back control.
Right.
And one of the questions I just asked my staff is, are we in the business of character development, or are we just worried about behavior control? Because in
Mm,
my mind, those are 2 completely different things. Our goal becomes character development, and that means allowing the kids to lead, to fail, and help them through that process. And
right.
if we truly want player-led teams, then we have to allow the kids to lead and help them understand how to lead and even how to fail and be vulnerable in front of their teammates as a leader. And I feel like people will admire and respect you for your strengths, but they're going to connect and relate with you through your weaknesses. And so teaching our kids how to lead, even through failure, even through poor decisions as a leader, helps other people relate to you. Because I would tell you this, if you as a leader have it all together, I have no interest in following you because I don't have my life together. I'm still trying to figure this out. And I
Hmm.
can't relate to you.
Sure. No,
And so
I no, I was gonna say I 100% agree.
And so we do give our kids a voice. They have a commitment statement that they write at the beginning of every summer, hanging in their locker right now.
Mm,
And this commitment statement allows discipline to be easy because all I have to do is call a player over to me and whisper to them, "You're not who you said you would be today."
yeah, that's all it takes.
And and what they discovered was they can do the same thing with us as coaches. We have a commitment statement. And if I'm not that person, I fully expect you, not just assistant coaches, but players, to hold me accountable to that.
Mm, yeah.
I'm not above the law. And so we are developing a program where they understand that accountability and holding each other accountable to being who we say we're going to be is what we're doing. That's how we operate. And I feel like it's a situation where we're seeing the results of that culture come into play.
Yeah, no, definitely. It absolutely sounds like it from the stories and the successes that you've shared for sure. Coach, as we transition to talk about the concept of making quick reads and decisions and some of the on the court aspects, can you start, Coach, by talking about your general offensive philosophy? What is it that you run on offense, and where and how important is it rather for those quick reads and decisions to be happening in your offense?
We actually averaged right about 72 points a game last year as a high school team, which was second in the state. Um, that's disappointing to me a little bit. I need to fix that. We need to figure out how to get to number one. But we play a very up-tempo game. I tell our kids that you have played a perfect game when I have to call nothing from the bench because we are playing at a pace that one is uncomfortable for the other team, two, that we're getting easy transition looks. One of the statistics that helps us measure that is we actually measure what we call scorebacks.
Okay,
If you
what are those?
if you score, how many times do we score that next possession?
Oh, okay.
So, for example, we played a team last year who was top 10 in the state. We went to their place and we gave up 40 points to them. So if you take the possessions that they scored those 40 points on, and you take our next offensive possession after they scored, we actually scored 52 points on those very same possessions that they scored 40. So we outscored them by 12 points on the next possession after they scored. And to
Wow,
me, that's
that's
very
huge.
demoralizing when you have to work hard to score and then we score again quickly.
Mm,
And
no,
so
I agree.
scorebacks is something that we tallied during the course of a game because we wanted to get the ball out of the net quickly and go. Or if it was a missed shot, we wanted to get a rebound and go. Think about defensively, the one thing coaches probably work the least on is converting from offense to defense. How do you do it?
Mm,
Very few people work on that. They talk
right.
about what to do when you get down there. They talk about how to play man to man, how to play zone, but they don't talk about what they're going to do to convert. And
Mm,
we are purposeful about that word convert because a lot of coaches use transition for both offense to defense and defense to offense, and we don't want confusion. So transition in our program describes going from defense to offense. Conversion or converting is we go from offense to defense. So I use that
okay,
term purposely. Very
right.
few coaches work on converting to defense. So in our mind, we need to try to score when your defense is at its weakest, when they don't know what they're doing yet. And we get so many shots in our offense by getting the ball off the rim, out of the net, and down the floor quickly. We have a young lady who's going to be a senior in 28 games last year. She hit about 118 threes. She's on pace to be the leading three-point shooter in the state of Indiana when she graduates. If she can duplicate that, go into the Miami of Ohio, amazing shooter. And she would just demoralize people. We get the ball inbounds up the sideline or across the court, and she just bury a three. Or we
Really?
hit him. We do that. So we did track scorebacks. The other thing we tracked was rim runs, because we have a rim runner, we tracked how many times that rim runner won that sprint down the court. We wanted to reward that. It's easy to rim run when you know you're going to get the basketball. It's not easy to rim run when you don't know or you know you're not going to get it, but you can still stretch that defense by sprinting the court. So we would tally how many times we had that won that rim run race, and then we also tracked rim run assists for looking up ahead to that rim run. So there were some things that we were probably unique in tracking because we wanted to play a very up-tempo transition game,
Sure.
and we just felt like very few teams practice that way. And so we would put them in an uncomfortable situation. There were a lot of games where we would jump out to an early lead, but then there were some where we're in a tight first quarter, it's 14-10, and we would just tell our kids, just stay the course, just stay the course. Um, our magic number is 61.
Okay.
In my 9 years at Warsaw, when we score 61 points, we have not lost a game.
Really?
And and so for us, that transitions to we need to get to 16 a quarter. We actually up that to 64. Let's just get to 64. Give me
Hmm.
16 a quarter. And so that was a way we measured our pace to make sure the game was at a pace that we wanted. And that might mean that we probably gave up some points and some shots early, knowing you can't keep this pace with us for 32 minutes. So we're a very up-tempo team. Once we got out of transition, our transition did flow freely into our offense, and we would teach them at that point in time how to make reads. That's a lot of what we're going to be talking about, but we allowed our transition to flow freely into our dribble drive without a lot of me calling something and pulling it back out. We wanted to stay in the attack mode. I tried to only call set plays on what we would call a rough touch. For
Okay. And
example,
what is that? Okay.
the rough touch is the referee is handing you the ball out of bounds and we're dribbling it up. We don't have an opportunity for transition.
Okay.
And so we would only try to call sets on rough touches, or if we felt like we had not scored in 3 possessions and things just weren't going well, we might call something. But most of the time, we gave them the freedom to play and read, um, and just not interrupt what they were doing. When I say that, I'm honest. Like, just you guys keep making reads.
Yeah. Yeah. With that, I think that's kind of a natural segue to just the concept, coach, of what can a coach do and what have you done to train players on those reads? What can a coach do to improve on a player's decision making and basketball IQ? I think we all want players who are, floor generals, like you said, those players who can be sort of left on their own, so to speak, and be able to be a player run team. So what goes into really growing that player's ability to make decisions and improving that basketball IQ?
I'm going to start off with we break all of our drills down, most of our drills, into two groups. We have precision drills. A precision drill is something I need you to get right. For example, a closeout and the angle of your closeout, that's a precision drill. I need it right. You
Hmm.
know, just different, those things that you want done the right way all the time. We group them into precision drills. So when we start that drill, I will tell our kids, this is a precision drill. I need you to get it right. And then we have decision drills. A decision drill is where you're going to have to make a decision on the fly, and it might be the wrong one. And so, just right off the bat, by grouping them into the two, we are telling our kids, you have the freedom to fail in this drill because you're going to make decisions. So that's the first thing. Two, the question you hear a lot in our practice is, what did you see? That is the question we as coaches continuously ask. What did you see? Because what they're going to do is they're going to tell you where their eyes went. When you have to answer that question, you're telling me where your eyes are.
Yeah.
And when they tell me that, I can now redirect your eyes. Well, this is what I saw. This is what maybe you should have been looking at. And I think one of the things that we as coaches probably assume is we assume that their eyes are looking where they need to be looking and where we're looking. But in reality, that's probably not true.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so answering that question for us tells us what they're looking at.
I
So
like that.
therefore we're directing eyes. And then we start getting into little things like teaching them what to look for. For example, if you see hip, you keep attacking. If you see numbers, you change directions. Hip, attack, numbers, change. So we're giving them a point of reference. And so when we start to ask, what did you see on the
Mhm.
attack? They can go, well, I saw a hip. Okay, you should have kept attacking. That's what you did. No, then what did you see? But I think we as coaches, I know I did early on, we fall into the trap of telling instead of asking. Well, just
Yeah.
ask them. They're going to tell you what they saw, you know, and it's going to help you as a coach understand what they're looking at and how you can fix that. So that's the thing. So, like I said, hip, we keep attacking numbers. And then, when you beat your defender, what did you see? Did you see the help side? Where were they? And so, just by generally asking those questions, you're going to learn a lot about your kids. And so, that's a lot of what we do, those two things, decision drills, precision drills. What did you see? But then every single shooting drill that we do is off of reads. So we play a ton of dummy defense with our coaches. So for
Okay.
example, we're in double drive, we're working on a loop to a pitch type action. And we have two coaches out there that are going to take away two of them. And you have to make a read. The shot that we're getting in that shooting drill is going to be you making a decision where the ball needs to go. And that's the shot we take. I think we as coaches get in the habit of shooting drills for the sake of shooting drills versus shooting drills within the context of our offense and making them make a read.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
all of our shooting drills are with dummy defenders where they have to make a read on where the ball goes. And then again, those questions as they're coming out of that rotation of the shooting drill, if it was a wrong read, what'd you see? And we have a young lady who moved in from a school in our conference this summer. She's coming to our school this year. Those shooting drills were very difficult for her because she wasn't used to making a read on where the ball used to go. She was used to doing a shooting drill.
Right.
And so every single shooting drill we do is with a dummy defender making reads. And then three, we play a ton of small-sided games. I know that's a common term in the coaching profession, but we break it down and make them make reads in our offense. For example, we'll go slot, corner, or we'll go slot, corner, short corner, and play 3-on-3 out of it. And I'll give, one coach 6 kids play 3-on-3. This coach has 6 kids and keep asking, what'd you see? What did you see? And showing them. And
Mm.
we actually have a huddle camera, which we roll out a bin cue board during practice. So if a kid is saying, "This is what I saw," and I'm saying, "Well, this is what I saw," there will be times we will take that kid over to the bin cue board, rewind the practice possession, and show them exactly. And there are times that we may be wrong. We may have seen something that we thought we saw, but we could see why they made the decision they made. And so that's just a constant thing in our practices, 3-on-3 small-sided games, along with the shooting drills, and just allowing them to make decisions and to fail making those decisions.
Mm. That's big to allow that failure to happen. I think, to encourage that those mistakes to be made, to not have a clean practice, so to speak, where there's going to be mistakes that are going to be made and players are maybe going to get a little like frustrated in a good way and it's going to be a little bit messy. I think there's so much learning that can be had in that.
It is, and our practices, we like to say this, our practices are messy, but we
I like
can't
that
we
word.
can't let them get sloppy.
I like that
Me
distinction.
Messy, not sloppy. If it gets sloppy, we have to fix some things. That becomes a precision. You know, messy, yet you're going to make some wrong reads. But what we're hoping is by putting them in that situation in practice on a daily basis, that they have made enough reads that come game time, they're going to make the right read.
Right, reads. Yeah. That's fantastic. No, I like that. I really like that distinction because you could definitely come into a trap, right, where your practices sort of get unproductive, right, where it gets, really sloppy and there's not much learning going on. But that right level that you kind of alluded to of, where it gets a little bit messy and it gets a little bit, grimy, but there's still a lot of productivity. That's like that sweet spot, right?
It is. And I think we as coaches often we want that, we want it to look clean at times. We're like, oh, yeah, that. And then when the game gets messy, we don't know how to operate. They don't know how to operate. And
Sure.
so, and so that's why, our practices are at a pace, every drill, everything, that it gets messy.
Hmm.
And we, I think we often criticize kids for poor decision making or even low basketball IQ, or they're slow to process, but then we never put them in that position in practice to speed up that process of decision making. But yet then we're blaming the kid for making poor decisions when in reality we haven't put them in that position.
Right. And I think that's a big potential pitfall you can fall into is you can have practices that are so clean, right? Those are the words that both of I used, that they're so clean and they're so structured and they're so safe, I think, for a lack of a better term, but games never quite work out that way. And things are going to be players are going to be put in situations and things are going to be happening that are not going to be necessarily neatly fit into a box. And to make sure that your players are not overwhelmed by that and they have decisions and reads they can make is super important. And so for you, I feel like as a coach, there's so much that you are learning and you're taking away from the decisions that you see them make in practice, from when you have those drills and you have those different small-sided games and all the other things that you're doing in practice. You are observing their decision making and you're kind of learning from the decisions they're making about why they're maybe even making the decisions that they are.
And that's 100% true. I'm learning every day. Oh, well, so and so keeps making the same decision. That's on me to figure out why.
Yeah.
Instead of criticizing it and telling them they're making poor decisions, well, how am I going to help you train your eyes to go someplace else? That type of thing. And I have to be honest, I wish I would have done that
Mm,
20 years ago, but
sure.
I fell into that trap of trying to tell our kids what to do. And there's one team on our schedule who they're what I call a system team. They run their system, they run it well, and they want it to be clean. And our defensive philosophy becomes to just cause chaos. in half court, because when you do that, they're not good at making the next decision, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so defensively, we just disrupt to the point that you have to make quick decisions because we know you are not going to make the right one most of the time when you're forced to make a decision at a quicker pace than you're used to doing in practice. And
Right.
so that's where in practice our drills are very up tempo. They're very, if we are doing a 4-on-4, 5-on-5 defensive drill, the drill's not over until we have secured the ball and got the ball out and going, because that's a quick decision that just boom, we're gone.
Mm.
Every little thing is a decision in our practices, and we are going to allow them the freedom to fail. And I think the side effect of that becomes your kids become comfortable failing, knowing that you're allowing them that space to fail, and they're not afraid of it anymore.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that players feel this sense of empowerment. I think when they know that they're going to give that freedom to fail. They're given that freedom to make decisions and explore what works and what doesn't work. We've talked to earlier, right, about this concept of like coach-led teams when everything is top down, but by allowing players to be able to make mistakes and be able to work through situations and be able to figure out what works and what doesn't. I think players take more ownership of their team because they feel that they have a say in practice, so to speak. They have some control over what's happening. They're not just always having to listen to specific directions. They're allowed to kind of explore and allowed to figure things out. And that in and of itself, I believe, grows their basketball IQ.
Absolutely. And honestly, I'm 52.
Hmm.
I probably sat down more this past year than I have in all my years combined. And I
Really?
had to purposely do that because there are times I want to be up coaching. And when I say I don't want to screw things up, I sincerely mean that. There are times I just need to sit down, be quiet, and let them do what they do. And I mean that sincerely. And so there were times I would force myself to walk over and just sit down and give them the freedom to go and figure some things out, and trust that we have trained them to make the right decisions in practice, so they're going to make the right ones in a game.
Mm.
And I ask myself this: what does it say about my belief in them and the belief in my ability to prepare them if during a game I have to be up yelling every decision they need to make? What does that say? I
Right.
didn't prepare you the way I needed to prepare you, and I don't trust you. And
Right.
I think the players feel a sense of trust when you allow them to make these decisions.
To your point, I really think you can tell the teams that really pushed themselves and were pushed in practice and really had strong, effective practices where they really worked really hard and they were able to grow their basketball IQ and they were able to make a lot of decisions because they feel those teams, excuse me, feel so prepared and they feel so assured of themselves because all of these situations they feel like they've been through them before. They feel almost like they're ready for everything. So that coach can, sit down knowing that these players in a practice situation have been through all sorts of situations that no matter what they're up against, they're going to be able to figure it out because they've been given the tools already needed to succeed.
And I completely agree with you. And that's where I probably done a complete 180, probably early on in my coaching career. If a player would come over and go, "Hey, coach, can we run this? Or can we run this action? Or this is what they're doing." I'd be like, "Why are you telling me that? Like, you probably don't know what you're talking about. Like, just listen to me." That was me early on. And now they're doing that. "Hey, coach, they're doing this. We're going to run this. All right, as long as everybody's on the same page, let's go." You
Yeah.
know, and they feel empowered to do that. And even asking them during the timeout, what are you guys comfortable? What do you want to run? Versus me telling you because I might draw something up that you're going, man, we're not comfortable doing that. Would you rather have them run your stuff that they're not comfortable doing or run something that they have said, yeah, we can run this? And there'll be times I'll be like, no, I don't think we can do that. How about this? That's maybe something similar, but giving them a voice during that time really empowers them. And it
Yes,
says, I trust you.
I 100% agree. Coach, I wanted to also ask quick before we hit our concluding statement, because this hour has flown by, but I wanted to specifically ask in terms of another specific aspect, excuse me, about making quick reads and decisions about, and I know you've touched on this earlier, but what sort of actions you look to have your players get out in transition? Are there certain prescribed reads or looks that you want your players to get in accomplish when they're off a defensive rebound or a turnover? Or, as we kind of mentioned before, are these things that you trust your players to kind of make the right reads depending on the situation and depending on what happens that you have that trust in them?
In transition, we don't run a ton of actions.
Okay.
We have our one person who is designated an outlet, our one person who is designated a rim run. But after that, we have, our trailer, our sprinters, they have a little bit more freedom. But teaching that outlet person how to read, does it go up my sideline? Do I need to cross the court to the other sideline? How do I read the rim run? And how do I know if we're going into our secondary actions? And our secondary actions is probably more where those reads come in, not that initial push. We hope we never have to get into secondary actions.
Hmm.
But when we do, we basically have 4 or 5 actions that we can run that unless they hear from me, they are free to run whatever they are communicating with each other. And a lot of times now with this group, it's not even a verbal communication. For example, with our rim run, we end up with a 4 out, 1 in.
Okay.
Well, a push action says that if the point guard throws the ball ahead and gets it back, or can't throw it ahead and ends up in the slot with the basketball, either of those situations, the point guard is going to end up in the slot with the basketball. They can push with a dribble down towards a ball side corner, which rotates the other 3 perimeter players for a quick reversal to get us into our dribble drive. Well, that push action can lead to a double, which is a double rub cut. It can lead to a triple, which is a double rub cut with the dunker setting a ball screen. And so reads like that, we give them the freedom to make.
Hmm.
There are times we will call something like, hey, on a free throw, we notice something. So hey, on a free throw, let's run push into triple. And there are times I will call that, but we also give them the freedom to do that because they recognize where people are on the floor and how to get them in better position to be successful. And that's really the basketball IQ we have. For example, Jocelyn Bricker, if she ends up on the ball side corner in transition, it's almost always going to be a push action. We're going to push her to the other corner, reverse it to her, and run a double rub cut so she can get downhill. She gets downhill as well as anybody I've ever seen in the girls' game. She's going to
Yeah,
Butler
that's awesome.
University, going to play. And so the girls recognize, hey, if she's in that corner, we're just going to push. Whereas if it's Brooke Zartman in that corner, they understand what we need to do in order to get her 3-point shot. We have just put them in that situation so many times during practice. Stop, look at the floor. How do we
Mm,
maximize this to get Justin downhill or Brooke a shot or the legs kneeling in a trail position, and they start to recognize that. And it's just things that we do every day in practice to help them understand that decision making. So to answer your question, we give them complete freedom unless they hear from us. If we recognize something, we'll call it, but it will almost always be, once again, during a rough touch. For example, a free throw, the ref is throwing you the ball. Hey, if we don't have anything in transition, we're running push into triple.
Mhm.
And so we call some actions, but we give them the freedom to make those reads.
No, I think that's fantastic, and I love the empowerment, and I imagine that you are able to, and I'll let you speak on this before we hit our concluding segment, that you are able to have some really productive conversations with your players because you can just ask them, right? What is it that they saw there, or on that decision, like what did you see on the floor? And so let's have a quick, we can have a quick discussion about it, and then you as a coach can say, okay, this is what my players are seeing, this is what they're seeing because I have found that I can learn a lot about what's happening during the course of a game by what my players tell me because they're the ones playing on the court. So their vision and their ability to see the floor is a much different perspective than mine. So I learn a lot from them when they're able to have that conversation with me and relay that information back.
Absolutely. I'm glad you learned that a lot younger than I learned that. I'm a slow learner, but absolutely.
Coach, there's a couple of questions that I ask every guest to wrap up, and I hope at one point I can have you back on because I know there's a lot more that we can discuss and more that I can dive into with some of the things that you shared. But you shared so much already that I really appreciated. But there are a couple questions that I do like to ask every guest here before we wrap up, and I'll start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. And I know that there's been a lot of moments in your coaching career, but is there a specific moment from your coaching career that you can share that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
No, I think there are a lot of those, but I think the one that stands out to me, and I was just talking to a teacher today about this in our first staff day. And when I said it, she kind of looked at me like, did you just say that? And I made the comment in a sense that I'm glad our girls had an opportunity to lose that state finals game. And she kind of looked at me like, you didn't want to win that game. I could see her expression. And all year long, we told our kids, your value does not come from what you do. You're not a basketball player. You're an amazing young lady who just happens to play the game of basketball. It's what you do. Your value comes from who you are. And we preach that all year long. But of course, when you go 26-1 and make it to the state finals game, they start to really think their value comes from that success. And after we lost the state finals game, we ended up 26-2 to be able to walk in the locker room and remind them that their value doesn't change just because we lost that game because it didn't come from the game to begin with. And I
Yeah.
think we as coaches lose sight of that so often, and especially young females, they need to hear how much value they have. I think they just thrive when they understand that their value comes from who they are. And for me as a coach to be able to say that to them after losing the biggest game of their careers and just to remind them of that was a powerful moment for all of us. And
Mm.
there were many things I probably wanted to say, things we could have done differently, things we could have changed, things I just felt like they needed to be reminded. And I think all of our young kids in today's society need to be reminded of their value and where it comes from, because in today's day and age, with the social media, the comparisons, the pressures that they face playing this game from their community, from their parents, from everyone, they get wrapped up in that and they feel like that's where their value comes from. And that is a coaching moment that I will forever remember, because it was a special moment just to be able to remind them of that after they lost.
And I think they needed that because that was maybe for some of them one of the lowest moments maybe that they felt. And maybe, a lot of them, I imagine, and obviously you know your players better than me, I'm sure a lot of them felt like they let themselves down or they let each other down or let you down. And I think a lot of our players, when they put so much of their time or effort into something, can completely wrap their identity around being, a basketball player or an athlete, and not remember that they are a person completely separate from that, that is, much more meaningful in the long run, who they are internally, and to know that, they're cared about as people, and the results on the court are what they are, but who they are as people is so much more significant, is probably something that they really needed to hear in that moment.
It is. And like I said, it was a great moment for us just to share together. And, I have those people who tell me, well, I'm sure it wasn't the ending you wanted. And at first, I wanted to agree with them. But the more I thought about it, the more my response to them actually became, no, it wasn't the ending that we wanted, but it was a journey that every head coach dreams of.
Right.
And so to me, it was a great moment. It was a powerful moment. And if I truly care about these kids as people first, that's what I felt like they needed to hear. And I think as a result, they know how much I love them, how much I care about them, and that goes beyond the game of basketball. And that's
A-
why you and I are in this profession.
Absolutely. If all we measured our success and happiness in this was by wins and losses, we would not be enjoying ourselves, would we?
With that, you are 100% correct. So,
Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I like to call a 60-second soapbox. I like to use it as a platform for you to get out a final idea, a final thought, a closing message, something to leave the listeners with. I hope you have something else, because what you did was really, really good, what you just said. So I hope you don't mind sharing one more little nugget that you have on your soapbox that you wouldn't mind sharing. So, Coach, I'm going to give you the floor, and if you want to go over 60 seconds, that's perfectly fine. It's just a title that I like to put. But, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor here and let you share out one more nugget of wisdom on your soapbox that you have.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, um, to be on this and to share not just my journey, but our journey. And I think we as coaches just need to remember why we do this. I know I just hit on that, but I just think that's extremely important. And I think we need to remember the impact that we have on these young kids. And to wrap that up for you, I'm going to give you a personal story. My daughter, I had an opportunity to coach here at Warsaw. And one of the summers going into her high school career, she was playing AAU, and I would not coach her AAU teams. She needed to learn to play for other coaches. I refused to play, but I was that dad who was a coach. And I remember an AAU tournament where she got in the car and she did not play very well. I was mad. I can't lie. I was pissed.
Mm,
And she got in the car and, we're starting to drive home. Some of those AAU games are far away. You're driving a couple hours to get home. And she says, Dad, what's wrong? I said, nothing, Caitlin. We
Mm,
drive for a little bit more, and she's like, Dad, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing, Caitlin. Now, please understand the car is quiet. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, please don't ask me a third time. To which a little bit farther down the road, she says, Dad, what's wrong? And I responded with, Caitlin, I didn't say anything. And her response killed me. And she said, I know, Dad. It's what you didn't say. And for me, not just as a dad, but for me as a coach, I think that's extremely important for us to remember. It's not just what we say, but it's also what we don't say, because there's a lot of power in silence. And I would just encourage us as coaches to say the things that the players need to hear and not just remain silent and say nothing. Tell them you're proud of them. Tell them you love them. Tell them those things, because that's what they are waiting to hear from you. Your players want nothing more than to please you. And I've learned that over my years to give them that positive feedback is powerful. And if you don't know it, the magic ratio is 5 to 1. We try to keep that ratio in our program, 5 positives for every negative. Once you get below 5 to 1, your brain starts to perceive a negative environment, a negative situation. So in our program, we try to stay 5 to 1, and that's true for my conversation and my communication with our players as well. 5 to 1. And for example, if a player dribbles down the court and dribbles off their foot, that's the negative. Nothing had to be
mm,
said. That's a negative. We need 5 positives to follow that to maintain a positive environment. And so just remember not just what you say, but what you don't say, and the power of those words, and try to keep a 5 to 1 relationship, not just on the court, but think about what happens in your marriage when it gets below 5 to 1. Your relationship with your spouse starts to turn negative, things start, and so understand the power of our words, and think about the power of one negative if it cancels out 4 positives, and choose to use those negatives wisely. That's just my
fantastic.
thing as a coach.
Yeah, and it's something I think that you really have to actively work at, right? I think as coaches, we're always looking at what needs to get done. Like nothing's good enough. We got to do better. Like never be satisfied. That mentality of constant improvement can also lead to constant criticism or players feeling that they're not never good enough and nothing that they do is good enough, and to be able to constantly positively reinforce players and letting them know like no, there is a lot of great that you're doing. There's so many things that you are doing well. I feel like our players need that.
They do. And then think about the difference between the words now and but. We train our coaching staff on this. The word but is such a powerful word. And let me phrase it to you this way: you're a nice guy, but what's coming next isn't good. And I only said you're a nice guy, but to get to the but part of this, what comes before the word but is not nearly as important as what comes after the word but. So think about, well, good blackout, but you just
Right.
canceled that out.
Nobody's
Put
listening to
the
the first part, right?
right, put the word now in there. Good blackout now.
Yeah,
And so little words like that, we're very purposeful with our communication and how we communicate with our kids. And in that, like you said, we get caught up in searching for what we can do better, that sometimes we forget to just acknowledge what they are doing and then challenge them with that next step. And so that's my encouragement for us coaches. I say that as a reminder to myself more than anything.
love it. Coach, I really want to thank you so much for coming on here and talking about so much. I love all the culture aspect you talk. I love the conversation we had about reads and decision making and how much you empower your players to make decisions as a way to improve their basketball IQ and some of the actions and the communication that you have with your players. I really enjoyed hearing about that level of empowerment. I use that word so much because that's truly what I feel is happening there at Warsaw as players feel a part of something special. They're really connected to a special thing that's happening, and beyond all of that, how much they're valued as people above all else. That's truly something really magnificent and wonderful to hear throughout your conversation. I would love to have you on again and continue to dive more into basketball and culture related topics. But Coach, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight and your story with us. And I wish you all the best as you look to have another great season up ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity again. Um, Feel free to share my email with anybody who wants it, as well as my phone number. My phone number is 574-536-5215. So 574-536-5215. People can contact me either by emailing me or texting me or calling my phone. I do have a whole folder of culture-based activities that we've just built over the years that I will be happy to share with you or with anyone else, so they can contact me if they would want to know more. I would love to pick their brain as well to see what they're doing.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that willingness to share, Coach. And thank you all so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.